This is Focus on Africa from BBC World News. I'm Sophie Ikenye. Our top stories. A dangerous assignment. As the number of attacks on journalists rise, we examine the situation on the continent.
Freedom of the press under our constitution and under any country, like any other freedom, is limited.
How to prevent terrorism. The UN Secretary General urges world leaders to look at the root causes. A medical emergency. How charging visitors for treatment in the UK is leaving African patients in limbo.
He wanted to do further tests and I refused. I said no. Because I would have had to pay it and I didn't have the money.
Also in the program, breaking language barriers. A musical show written entirely in Pidgin is being performed for the first time in Lagos.
The quarterfinals of the African Cup of Nations are officially underway in Egypt. Senegal just took the lead moments ago against Benin, and South Africa prepares to face Nigeria later tonight.
Thanks for joining us on Focus on Africa from BBC World News. Violence against journalists has reached unprecedented levels this year. That's according to Reporters Without Borders. They say journalists are being killed, imprisoned and abducted. Figures compiled by the group show that worldwide last year, 80 journalists were killed in the line of duty. Over 300 were detained by governments, while 60 were held hostage, and 3 are missing. Now, during this period, Egypt had the most incarcerated journalists in Africa, with 38 in prison. And though no journalist was known to have been killed on the continent in 2018, Ahmed Hussein Swaleh, a Ghanaian investigative journalist who collaborated with the BBC, was shot dead in Accra, Ghana in January this year. Well, a global conference for media freedom has kicked off in London today to shine the spotlight on the issue. Peter Okoche sent this report.
Well, this conference is being attended by over 1,000 delegates and government officials from 100 countries all over the world, including, of course, Africa. The idea is to promote media freedoms in every single country in the world. Now, one of the African countries that has come under criticism in recent times has been Tanzania. Since President Magufuli took over power in 2015, his government has been accused of introducing draconian laws which many people believe are meant to muzzle the press. Well, I caught up with Tanzania's Foreign Minister Palamagamba Kabudi today and asked him why his government was trying to muzzle the press.
And the press in Tanzania is free to operate, not only Tanzanian press, but also foreign-based press. The BBC is operating in Tanzania. They have a studio quite well. Deutsche Welle, Radio France International, Reuters, Bloomberg.
Since 2015, since this administration came into office in 2015, at least 5 newspapers and 2 radio stations have been suspended under the pretext of false information, sedition, and threatening national security. If that is not muzzling of the press, what is that?
The only newspaper which has been closed down is the one which was supporting the government, known as Tekeleza, because of corruption. The other newspapers, they were suspended. One of them for 7 days. But there is a newspaper known as Nipashe. Once they realized actually they have committed professional misconduct, they suspended themselves for 3 months. So no single newspaper has been banned.
When the government follows those suspensions with the kind of statement that President Magufuli made in 2017, when he said media houses and journalists should not take their freedoms too far, what exactly does that mean? Don't take your freedoms too far.
Yes, freedom of the press under our constitution and under any country, like any other freedom, is limited. It must. The limitations are the following: public safety, public health, public security. So any newspaper or any news media or any media which goes beyond the prescribed freedoms under privacy, the right to privacy, so if it goes beyond and infringes on the right of privacy, defamation, security, public health. In our case, if it attacks the fundamental principles of our nation, secularism is one of them.
I need to ask you about Azori Gwanda, a Tanzanian journalist, investigative journalist who had been writing stories about the rate of murders in a part of the country. Now, he's been missing since November 2017. Where is he?
Let me tell you, when you refer to that matter, that was one of the most painful experiences that Tanzania went through. In the refugee area, it's not only Azori Rwanda, Azori who has disappeared and died. I want to assure you, we are now taking every measure, not only in refugee, but in other areas of Tanzania, to make sure that our people are safe, be they journalists, be they police, be they ordinary citizens.
I was speaking there to the Tanzanian Foreign Minister, Palamagamba Kabudi. Now, this conference continues on Thursday, where the focus will shift to individual continents, and the spotlight will be on African countries. And we'll be here to cover it for you.
Peter Okwoche there. Let's take a quick look now at other stories making headlines across Africa and the rest of the world. Hundreds of protesters have taken to the streets in Nigeria's capital, Abuja, a day after 2 of their members were killed. At least 40 protesters were also arrested after they clashed with the police in an attempt to invade the parliament on Tuesday. Parts of the city are on lockdown and the police has ordered 24-hour surveillance. The group is demanding the release of leader Sheikh El-Zakzaky, who has been in detention since 2015.
The government should know that no amount of killing will stop us, except if they are ready to kill all of us, and we are many. And the more they kill us, the more people come down to Abuja. The best thing is for this government to respect itself, respect the law of this land, obey the court that order for the total freedom of Sheikh El-Zakzaky, and allow him go. He's sick. Let him go for medication. This is the best solution.
France has denied breaching a UN arms embargo after 4 of its anti-tank missiles were found on a rebel base in Libya. Its defense ministry says the US-made Javelin missiles were deployed 9 years ago to protect its troops serving in Libya and were due to be destroyed. And the US has accused Iran of extortion over its nuclear program at an emergency meeting of the UN nuclear watchdog. Iran wants Europe to provide compensation for the impact US sanctions has had on its economy. Now, the US reimposed sanctions last year after it abandoned the 2015 nuclear deal. State violence and abuse of power can act as the final tipping point for radicalization. Now, those are the words of the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres at a counter-terrorism conference that's being held in Kenya. He's urged member states to acknowledge and address factors that lead to terrorism. Well, the BBC's Ferdinand Omondi reports.
This is the first UN Prevention and Counter-Terrorism Conference where all member states have been invited, and the UN Secretary General took the opportunity to remind the leaders present that terrorism does not arise from a vacuum. He cited bad governance and exclusion as some of the factors that lead to radicalization. He also praised the role of women in fighting inequality, which he also said could lead to conflict, and then he passionately spoke on the need for more financing.
I deeply believe that African peace enforcing and counter-terrorism operations must have strong and clear mandates by the UN Security Council, backed by sufficient, predictable and sustainable financial support, namely through assessed contributions.
The use of non-enforcement measures is also being discussed here, and Kenya's President Uhuru Kenyatta spoke of the country's reintegration program where they're trying to bring back former radicalized citizens back into the fold, a measure he says has so far been successful.
Over the last 3 years, Kenya has prioritized this area by implementing legal and policy tools, in addition to working closely with local groups and civil society. Already, we have seen positive results from our endeavors, including hundreds of individuals, many of them returning terrorist fighters, turning away from terrorism, and leading the fight to similarly rescue others who remain trapped in the throes of extremism.
Tomorrow, it is the youth who take center stage, and for the better part of the morning, they will be discussing how to cooperate with governments and regional organizations in order to strengthen resilience. Ferdinand Mondi, BBC News, Nairobi.
Well, the UN Secretary General spoke to the BBC about the fight against terror in the Sahel region. He says the root causes of terror are complex.
In Africa, we have today a serious problem. If one looks at the Sahel, that is probably the most sensitive region, you see terrorism spreading, and you see that both the security mechanism that is in place is not sufficiently strong. And I would advocate for African forces with a stronger mandate from the Security Council and with assessed contributions, predictable funding to be able to fight terrorism more effectively than what happens today. Second, you see that the climate change drought is evolving in the Sahel. You see that development has enormous gaps in the Sahel. And so, because the security mechanism in place is not effective, and because the development problems and the climate change aggravation are having the impacts they have, terrorism is spreading. It started in Mali, it moved to Burkina Faso, and now even the countries of the coast are worried because they see terrorism coming close to Ghana, close to Benin, close to Cote d'Ivoire. So there is a lot to be done to be more effective in cracking down against terrorists and more effective in the prevention. And prevention is development, prevention is human rights, prevention is mediation among communities, prevention is the capacity to enter in dialogue with young people and explain what is the true value of Islam or of Christianity or other religion that is so dramatically misinterpreted by those that promote terrorism.
Antonio Guterres there, the UN Secretary General. Now, here in the United Kingdom, the National Health Service is being held up as a beacon of healthcare, free at the point of use for those who need it. But that's not the case if you're an international visitor. Since April 2015, only residents have been able to access the service free of charge. Now, the change has been accused of harming patients. The BBC's Katrine Nye met one South African woman who found herself unable to pay and, as a result, is now gravely ill.
This one is from the Overseas Visitors team, informing us that Mom may not be entitled to free treatment on the NHS.
This is Thane Klein-Hens and his mum, Renee. She's been sleeping on his sofa for over a year now. Thane's lived in the UK for 30 years, and last May, Renee flew from South Africa for his wedding on a visitor visa. But while here, she started having serious breathing problems.
Mom was very ill, and the GP then saw Mom and did a test on her for her oxygen levels, and she was so ill that he immediately called an ambulance and they rushed her to King's A&E. They then rushed Mom up to a ward. There was a person from the Overseas Visitors department, and they'd gone to her bed to interview her. We were very anxious.
Thane then made what may seem like a strange decision to discharge his mum.
They strongly advised that we didn't take Mom out of hospital, strongly advised. Definitely do not leave the hospital. Mom is too ill and she needs an oxygen tank.
At that point, did you know what was wrong with your mum?
No.
Renee isn't eligible for free NHS care, and they were worried about being billed.
He wanted to do further tests and I refused. I said no. Because I would have had to pay it and I didn't have the money.
A GP's told Renee she's too sick to fly home. She's been given enough tests in emergency care to establish she has chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. But Renee still needs more investigation. Because you've not had these tests, you don't know if it's something that could be treated.
If you are you're handcuffed, I mean, that's how I feel.
So have you just accepted that you're going to die here and you're not going to be able to find out any more about what's wrong with you?
No. That's exactly, yeah, you're right, but what I'm trying to tell you is that's exactly what's going to happen.
There is growing opposition to the NHS charging regime. 2 weeks ago, the British Medical Association called for the policy to be abandoned completely. And now, the Royal College of Midwives has told us that it must be suspended.
We do understand that people have come over and used the NHS for free care, but we're not those people. And this doesn't seem the NHS that I that I work for that I know. And it's my mom.
Sorry.
She should be helped. Really, she should be getting some help.
This is Focus on Africa from BBC World News. Still to come, they thought they'd be a shoe-in for the AFCON finals, but with their dreams dashed, are Egyptian fans looking to get refunds on their tickets? I'm Sophie Ikenye, and you're watching Focus on Africa from BBC World News. The top story on this program: representatives from more than 100 countries are here in London for a two-day conference that's aimed at protecting journalists' freedom around the world. You're watching BBC Focus on Africa. It's time now for some sport. Let's join Pierre-Antoine Denis in Cairo. And Pierre, the quarterfinals are underway.
Yes, absolutely. And Senegal is, as it stands, the first team through to the semi-final. There's still a few minutes to play between Senegal and Benin. Senegal is leading 1-0 thanks to a goal from Idrissa Gana Gueye, the Everton midfielder. It could have been 2-0, but Sadio Mane's goal was disallowed by VAR, used for the first time ever in the history of African Cup of Nations. We are in stoppage time at the present time, so we don't know yet if Senegal will qualify, but the Teranga Lions are on their way to the semi-finals. Tonight at 7 o'clock GMT, Nigeria plays against South Africa in the Cairo International Stadiums. That will look empty. It is true that when Egypt doesn't play, stadiums in this AFCON are not full. But this time around, although the tickets are sold out, not many people will come to the game because they hope that Egypt was playing. But because of Egypt's defeat against South Africa on Saturday, Egyptian fans are sad, frustrated, and are now facing a dilemma for their tickets. Saturday night on the streets of Cairo, shock and disappointment evident on the faces of the Egypt fans. This was the first time they saw the national team miss a quarter-final of the biggest African football tournament in 15 years. South Africa surprised the continent with a 1-0 last-minute win over the host nation, giving them an early exit from the Nations Cup. Some of the Egyptian fans were so sure of their team's success, tickets for the quarter-final against Nigeria were already sold out even before the game against South Africa. So now they are caught with a dilemma: attend a match they don't care for, or not go and lose the ticket money. With prices going up to 500 Egyptian pounds apiece, this is not an option for many Egyptians, as it means sacrificing almost a quarter of the average minimum wage per person a month. The BBC has learned that many fans have been trying to get refunds or even resell their tickets without success.
I would say if the tickets were a little less expensive than they are, we would have seen better turnout in the majority of the games. Some of them were all right. I mean, Algeria, Senegal, for example, Cote d'Ivoire, Morocco, but it would have been better with less expensive prices. I think some of the fans are gonna show up in the stadiums, but it's going to be totally different from what we would have seen had Egypt been in the quarterfinals, semi-finals.
But it seems AFCON failure is just the tip of the iceberg. Some Egyptians believe problems in national teams have been going on for some time.
The national team used to represent me, but now it's totally different. The players only care about becoming famous and making more TV commercials. They don't really care about their fans or the game itself.
The stage is all set at the Cairo International Stadiums for the final on the 19th of July, but it remains to be seen if the other countries have enough support to fill the 75,000 capacity venue if the Egyptian fans decide to stay at home. But even if the stadium will not be full tonight, fan zone across Nigeria and South Africa will be, and the excitement, as you will see, is very high.
I think that history says that we're going to lose, but we know that sometimes history is a bad motorist because it doesn't indicate. So there's a chance that we might just pull through, and I think it's a very important moment for the country to just even have made it this far.
We're definitely going to take this one. The momentum has been different this time around, and I would say the experience is there as well. If we manage to beat Egypt, then what would stop us to beat Nigeria?
And I believe Nigeria is up to the task and then we are going to win. That's just my belief, we are going to win. Nigeria is determined, we have the spirit. I think among the guys, you see the spirit, the fighting spirit there, like the way they came back against Cameroon and we scored 2 goals within 3 minutes, which is very, very impressive. So I believe that even if South Africa should score first, we are still going to beat them.
It is not going to be an easy match. It is going to be a tough one. Based on the history, although we have edge over South Africa, and based on my prediction, we are still going to definitely win South Africa.
In other news, the Vice President of the Burundian Football Federation has been arrested pending investigation after the disappearance of bonus money for the national team players who played in the African Cup of Nations in Egypt. The BBC understands that Mr. Abimana Aimable has been placed under arrest since Saturday. The BBC spoke to the Burundian police without success, but a source close to the Egyptian FA confirmed the story. This same person said that Mr. Abibana was arrested together with 2 other employees while investigations are being carried out. Sophie, just before I hand back to you, Senegal and Benin are in stoppage time and Senegal is on the verge of being the first team qualified for the semi-finals of the African Cup of Nations.
Wow, thank you very much indeed for that very latest update. Pierre-Antoine there for us in Cairo. Thank you. Now, you may be familiar with Pidgin English, spoken across West Africa, and the mix of English, European and local languages. Pidgin has often been considered better suited to the streets than the stage. But in the Nigerian megacity, Lagos, one woman is trying to change this. A musical show written entirely in Pidgin is being performed there for the first time. Our correspondent, Mayeni Jones, went along.
An invitation into a different world. Song Queen is the creation of Helen Epega, also known as the Venus Bushfires. The story of a family of ethereal singers who sing to maintain peace in the world is a metaphor for our modern society.
Tough times in the world, really challenging times. So this is a way for me to bring, in an inspiring way, African culture in a positive way to the world. Music can stop wars, I believe.
And this internationalist outlook is at the heart of the production.
So Helen, this is the hung. It's
Yes.
central to your piece.
My little baby.
Yeah. Show me how it works.
Okay, so I'll show you a little sequence, and it's a light touch.
Okay, so
Perfect. So something like this.
the hung is originally a Swiss instrument that was inspired by the steel drums of Trinidad. And that's what's impressive about the Pidgin opera. It borrows from influences from around the world to promote its message of peace and unity.
Pidgin has long been considered the language of the streets, but initiatives like Song Queen show this may be changing.
Well, before we go, let's take a quick look again at our top story here on Focus on Africa. Violence against journalists has reached unprecedented levels this year, according to Reporters Without Borders. They say journalists are being killed, imprisoned and abducted. Figures compiled by the group show that worldwide last year, 80 journalists were killed in the line of duty, over 300 were detained by governments, while 60 were held hostage and 3 are missing. That's Focus on Africa for now. Thanks for your company.